The breaking point. The last stars visible from Terra Nova Station were dying behind a wall of enemy ships when Commander Sarah Chen realized humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, it was their stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable. She stood at the observation deck, watching the hegemony fleet blot out constellation after constellation. Each vessel was a testament to centuries of conquest, their crystalline hulls pulsing with energy that made her radiation sensors scream warnings. Behind her, the station's emergency klaxons had been wailing for 3 hours straight. "Commander, we've lost contact with Platform 7, Lieutenant Marcus Webb reported, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his dark skin. "That's the last of our orbital defenses." Sarah turned from the window. Her reflection, short black hair, tired brown eyes, the scar on her left cheek from the Mars uprising, briefly superimposed over the approaching armada. "Time until they're in firing range?" 43 minutes, ma'am. 43 minutes until humanity's furthest outpost became another footnote in the hegemony's expansion across the galaxy. The crystalline beings had conquered 17 species before finding Earth's colonies. Their message to humanity had been broadcast in perfect English, learned from intercepted transmissions. Submit to integration or face complete annihilation. You have 7 solar rotations to comply. That was 8 days ago. Earth's united government had sent one word in response: no. Sarah activated her command interface, pulling up tactical displays that painted an increasingly grim picture. The station's weapons, mass drivers, nuclear missiles, even the experimental plasma cannons, had proven useless against hegemony shields that bent space itself. Their enemy's technology wasn't just superior. It operated on principles human science barely understood. "All department heads to the war room," she commanded through the station-wide comm. "This is not a drill." The war room was cramped, designed for a command staff of 12. Sarah looked at the 7 faces around the table, all that remained after the suicide run on the hegemony vanguard yesterday. Chief Engineer Dmitry Volkov sat with his prosthetic arm twitching, a nervous tick from the neural interface. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, their science officer, clutched a tablet displaying incomprehensible alien energy readings. Security Chief Rosa Martinez had her jaw set in that particular way that meant she was calculating odds she didn't like. "I won't sugarcoat this," Sarah began. "Our conventional defenses have failed. The hegemony will be here within the hour, and when they arrive, they expect us to either surrender or die in a glorious but futile last stand." "So we surrender?" asked Communications Officer James Park, his young face pale. "No." Sarah brought up a holographic display of the station. "We're going to do something they don't expect. We're going to survive, and we're going to make them bleed for every meter of this station." Dmitry leaned forward, his gray eyes sharp. "Commander, their weapons can vaporize our hull plating. How do we fight that?" "We don't fight their weapons. We fight their expectations." Sarah highlighted various sections of the station. Every species the hegemony has conquered followed the same pattern. Organized military resistance, formal battle lines, and when those failed, surrender. They're expecting us to play by those rules. "The Phoenix Protocol," Dr. Nakamura whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. Sarah nodded. The Phoenix Protocol was a theoretical last resort strategy, developed after humanity's first contact with hostile aliens during the Proxima incident. It called for the complete abandonment of traditional military structure in favor of cellular resistance. Every human becoming a potential weapon, every corner a potential ambush. "You're talking about turning the station into a death trap," Martinez said, a grim smile tugging at her scarred lips. "Asymmetric warfare on a scale they've never seen." "Exactly. Dmitry, I want you to rig every non-essential system to overload on command. Turn our life support systems into weapons. James, encode and scatter our technical databases throughout the civilian network. Make them work for every byte of data. Yuki, everything we know about their technology, their biology, their psychology, distribute it to everyone on this station." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't planning for a battle. They were planning for a war of attrition that could last months, maybe years. "Commander," Webb said quietly. Admiral Reyes ordered all civilians evacuated. Sarah's expression hardened. "Admiral Reyes is commanding the defense of Earth. Out here we make our own rules. Anyone who wants to leave can take the emergency shuttles, but I'm betting most will stay." She was right. When the evacuation order was given as voluntary, Of the station's 30,000 inhabitants, only 3,000 chose to leave. The rest, miners, engineers, families who had spent generations in space, even the children old enough to understand, chose to stay. Dr. Nakamura's 8-year-old daughter, Keiko, summed up the colony's sentiment when she refused to board an evacuation shuttle. If the monsters want our home, they'll have to take it from us. As the hegemony fleet moved into attack position, their crystalline forms creating an aurora effect against the cosmic radiation, Sarah stood in the command center receiving final reports. Explosive charges set throughout sections C through J, Dimitri reported. I've turned our mining equipment into the biggest IEDs in human history. Civilian militia groups formed and armed, Martinez added. We've distributed everything from mining lasers to kitchen knives. They know they can't win a straight fight, but they understand hit and run. Communication networks fragmented and encrypted, Park confirmed. They'll have to crack 10,000 individual codes to shut us down completely. Through the viewport, Sarah watched the lead hegemony vessel extend what their xenobiologist had identified as weapons arrays. Beautiful, terrible crystalline structures that looked more like art than instruments of war. All stations, this is Commander Chen, she broadcast throughout Terra Nova. In approximately 10 minutes, the enemy will demand our surrender. They believe they've already won because every other species has fallen to them. They think we'll break like the others. She paused, watching her people, humanity's furthest children, working at their posts with grim determination. They're about to learn that humans don't break. We shatter and every piece keeps fighting. When their soldiers walk through our halls expecting submission, they'll find that every human, soldier, civilian, child, is a warrior. They want to add us to their empire. They'll choke on us first. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the translated image of the hegemony, Commander, a being of living, crystal whose facets reflected light in ways that hurt, human eyes to perceive. Humans of Terra Nova Station. Its harmonious voice resonated through the speakers. Your defensive platforms are destroyed. Your fleet is scattered. You stand alone against the might of 10,000 conquered worlds. Submit now, and you will be integrated peacefully into our collective. Resist, and you will cease to exist. Sarah looked around the command center at her crew, saw the fear in their eyes, but also something else, a stubborn, almost irrational determination that had carried humanity from African savannas to the stars. She opened the communication channel, aware that her next words would likely be the last formal military communication from Terra Nova Station. Hegemony Commander. I am Commander Sarah Chen of Terra Nova Station. I have been asked to deliver humanity's response to your demands. She paused, knowing that military historians, if any survived, would record this moment. Come and take it. The channel closed. For a moment, silence filled the command center. Then the hegemony weapons fired and Terra Nova Station's hull began to burn. But in the flames, something else was born. Not victory, not in any conventional sense, but something the hegemony had never encountered in 17 conquests. Humans who refused to know when they were beaten. The Phoenix Protocol. The hegemony's first soldier through the breach was a warrior who had conquered worlds for 3 centuries. Its crystalline form stood 4 meters tall, refracting light into weapon-grade lasers with every movement. It expected cowering humans begging for mercy. Instead, it found an empty corridor filled with Christmas lights. The warrior paused, its multifaceted consciousness trying to process this anomaly. The colorful earth decorations blinked in cheerful patterns, completely at odds with the devastation outside. It took another step forward and the floor exploded. Dmitry Volkov watched through a hidden camera as 20 tons of mining explosives reduced the hegemony warrior to glittering dust. First blood to humanity, he muttered into his encrypted comm. Section C7 is slag, but we got one. Throughout Terra Nova Station, similar scenes played out. The hegemony forces, accustomed to organized resistance they could systematically crush, found themselves in a nightmare of unpredictability. A mess hall became a killing field when civilians threw homemade acid bombs created from cleaning supplies. A kindergarten classroom's walls were rigged to collapse, crushing 2 invaders beneath colorful drawings of earth animals they'd never comprehend. Sarah Chen had abandoned the command center. It was too obvious a target. Instead, she coordinated the resistance from a maintenance closet, using a network of quantum encrypted communicators that Dr. Nakamura had distributed. "They're moving toward the reactor core," reported Martinez over the comm. "Looks like 40 of them using some kind of energy shield." "Let them come," Sarah replied. "Yuki, you ready?" Dr. Nakamura's voice crackled through. "I've been studying their shield harmonics. If my calculations are correct, a focused electromagnetic pulse at 447.3 terahertz should create a resonance cascade. In English, Doc? We can turn their own shields into bombs, but we'll only get one shot before they adapt." Sarah smiled grimly. "Then we make it count. All units converge on the reactor level. Time to show them human improvisation." The hegemony commander, observing from its flagship, watched the tactical display with growing confusion. Its forces were taking casualties. Not many by military standards, but any casualties were unprecedented. The 17 species before humans had either fought conventionally or surrendered. None had turned their own habitat into a weapon. "Analysis," it commanded its tactical officer. "The humans appear to have abandoned centralized command structure," the officer reported, its crystalline form pulsing with confused colors. "Each group operates independently with no discernible pattern. Our predictive algorithms are failing." The commander's form darkened, the equivalent of a frown. "Impossible. All sapient species follow logical patterns of behavior. The humans do not appear to be logical." Inside the station, 8-year-old Keiko Nakamura was proving the hegemony's assessment correct. While her mother worked on shield frequencies, Keiko had been assigned to messenger duty, running physical notes between resistance cells when electronic communication was too risky. But she'd had her own idea. The hegemony soldiers moved through corridors using a form of echolocation, their crystalline bodies singing at frequencies humans couldn't hear. But Keiko could feel the vibrations, and more importantly, she'd noticed they followed the songs like paths. So she'd started leaving her own trails. Ultrasonic emitters from the science lab, each programmed with recordings of hegemony songs that led nowhere, or better yet, into traps. She watched from a ventilation grate as 3 hegemony soldiers followed one of her false trails, straight into what used to be the station's swimming pool. Dmitri had drained it and filled it with industrial solvent. The soldiers' crystal bodies, nearly invulnerable to human weapons, began dissolving like sugar in acid rain. "That's for taking our home," she whispered. At the reactor level, Sarah's improvised army had assembled. 63 humans carrying everything from mining equipment to kitchen utensils, facing 40 hegemony warriors behind an impenetrable energy shield. "Remember," Sarah broadcast to her people, "we're not trying to win. We're trying to teach them that humans are too expensive to conquer." The hegemony forces advanced in perfect formation, their shields shimming like a soap bubble. They expected the humans to flee or charge futilely against their protection. They didn't expect Dr. Nakamura to step forward with what looked like a cobbled-together hairdryer, connected to the station's main power grid. "Now!" Sarah shouted. Nakamura triggered her device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hegemony shield began to sing, a beautiful, terrible harmony that rose in pitch until human ears bled. The warriors inside gestured frantically, trying to drop their protection, but the resonance cascade had begun. The shield collapsed inward, compressing 40 hegemony warriors into a space the size of a matchbox before exploding outward in a shower of crystal fragments. The remaining human fighters didn't cheer. There wasn't time. They swept forward, using mining lasers to cut down the confused survivors. In 3 minutes of brutal close-quarters fighting, the reactor level was human territory again. But the cost was evident. Of the 63 humans who'd entered the fight, only 28 walked away, and half of those were injured. The hegemony commander watched the tactical feed with something its species had never experienced before. Doubt. "Casualties?" it asked. 417 warriors lost in the first 6 hours, the tactical officer reported, human casualties estimated at 3,000. Those numbers should have been encouraging. Humans were dying at a rate of 7 to 1. But the commander had brought 10,000 warriors to subjugate what should have been a defenseless station. At this rate, they would win, but at a cost that would make Terra Nova a cautionary tale rather than a victory. "Perhaps we should consider withdrawal and orbital bombardment," suggested another officer. "No," the commander said, though its form flickered with uncertainty. "We cannot show weakness. Continue the assault, but doubt once seated grew. The hegemony warriors, accustomed to inevitable victory, began to hesitate at every corner. Was that pile of toys a trap? Did that humming from the ventilation mean another cascade bomb? Why was that human child skipping through a war zone while singing something about London Bridge falling down? By the third day, the hegemony had taken only 30% of the station. The humans had turned the rest into a maze of traps, false walls, and killing fields. Worse, they'd started broadcasting. James Park. From a hidden studio, transmitted on all frequencies the hegemony couldn't jam. This is Free Terra Nova. Today marks our third day of resistance against the so-called invincible hegemony. Current kill ratio: 1 human for every 0.17 hegemony warriors. To our fellow humans across the colonies, they bleed crystal and crystal breaks. The message spread through quantum entanglement communicators to Earth, to Mars, to the mining stations in the asteroid belt. Humanity had found the hegemony's weakness. They couldn't adapt to chaos. On the 5th day, something unprecedented happened. The hegemony requested a ceasefire to collect their dead. Sarah Chen, her face gaunt from days without sleep, appeared on the main screen. Behind her, the survivors of Terra Nova stood, maybe 8,000 from the original 30,000, but everyone still holding a weapon. You wish to discuss terms? The hegemony commander asked. No, Sarah replied. We want you to understand something. You've taken 70% of our station. It cost you 2,000 warriors. We have 23 more stations, 14 colonies, 3 inhabited planets, and Earth. 10 billion humans, each one capable of becoming what you faced here. She paused. Letting that sink in, you can kill us all, but can you afford to? Your empire conquers to grow stronger. Tell me, Commander, after losing millions of warriors to take Earth, will you be stronger? Or will the next species you meet find you weakened, depleted, vulnerable? The commander's crystalline form remained silent for a long moment. 3 days later, the hegemony fleet withdrew from Terra Nova Station. They left behind technology and resources. Payment, they called it, for a military consultation on asymmetric warfare tactics. The official records would show that humanity had been evaluated and deemed economically unfeasible for integration. But across the galaxy, in whispers between species, the hegemony had conquered. A different story spread, the story of the species that looked at impossible odds and asked, "Is that all you've got?" The species that turned children into saboteurs, civilians into soldiers, and their own homes into weapons. The species that didn't know when to quit. The species that won by refusing to lose. In her final log entry, Commander Sarah Chen wrote, "Terra Nova Station is free. We lost 22,000 souls, but we taught the galaxy a lesson. Humans don't break under pressure. We become diamonds, sharp enough to cut anyone who tries to hold us."